Good morning. And if you'll remember, a few weeks ago, I talked about doing an episode with the Interpretive Rangers at both the state and the local park level. And today we're doing just that. Today we're at Wormslow Historic Site. So get ready, we're going to learn what it takes to become and be a successful interpretive ranger. Today we are at Noble Jones's estate, the Wormslow Historic Site. We're going to speak with Ranger Aaron and Ranger Jacob and follow along as they go about their daily jobs and hopefully learn something along the way. Please excuse audio for the first part of this as the cicadas were out in force today.
So we're going to do this again.
Sure.
Aaron, if you don't mind, how long have you been doing it?
I've been doing living history for about 25 years.
That would be age 13?
Yes, that's right. I started out doing living history when I was 13, exactly.
It's not like we didn't know that one.
And I volunteered and worked at different historic sites growing up. Had some amazing parents who took me to places where history happened. And that really allowed me to be immersed in sharing the love of history with others.
And what area was this?
Well, I started out in Delaware, and my parents lived in Delaware. After I graduated from the University of Delaware in 2006 with a degree in history education, I moved down to Virginia, and then I got all Twitter dated and fell in love with Georgia Peach. Moved down here to Georgia.
Twitter faded. Okay. And so, where was the first location you started working at here in Georgia?
The first location was at Old Fort Jackson, which is operated by the Coastal Heritage Society.
Right. So you've done Fort Jackson and Wormslow. And are those the only two in the Savannah area that you worked at?
Those are the only two sites. Although the Coastal Heritage Society also operates the Savannah History Museum, and they have some artifacts from the bloodiest hour of the night in the entire American War in Savannah in 1779. So we have battlefield tours there called Lotus and Liberty, which start inside the museum and then take us outside a battlefield Memorial Park, which is where we have the location of the original Spring Hill Redoubt. It was a focal point of the Allied assault on October 9th, 1779. So I've also worked there with the Coastal Heritage Society, and then I've had a number of other sites, but those are the primary locations where I've been working.
And are you a volunteer? Because I know there's some volunteers, and then there's some paid guys that are paid through the state of Georgia. With the Coastal Heritage, are you paid or are you
Yes.
volunteer?
Yes, so I'm the interpretive supervisor, and I assist the director of interpretation of the Coastal Heritage Society.
Okay. And what about here at Wormslow?
So I'm a part-time park ranger here at Wormslow.
Okay. Speaking of park ranger, the interpretive ranger, we always see a lot of you guys in period dress, but those aren't the only interpretive rangers, correct?
Well, we wear many hats as park rangers, and so many times we'll be posted at the cottage or at the gate, doing gate guard duty. We also will be at the visitor center. We also do a lot of the preservation, patrolling on the trails, and that nature. So we wear many hats. Now, not all the park rangers are interpretive rangers. Some of them are not necessarily interested in wearing the period dress and doing the historical interpretation. There is one interpretive ranger here at Wormslow, and he is responsible for planning and training and has that area of focus. So there are other park rangers, but I suppose that really there is such thing as a full-time interpretive ranger. But pretty much all the park rangers have the opportunity to do the historical interpretation if they would want.
Okay. And
I spoke with Aaron at length today, and we will see him again later. But so far, two things are already beginning to stand out: a love for history beginning at a young age, and a formal education in history. Speaking of starting at a young age, you may remember when we came to Wormslow to do an episode, we ran into this young man, Ranger Jacob. Well, today, we see him not as a British soldier, but as a state of Georgia park ranger. Okay, so earlier today we spoke with Aaron, who was in the time period clothing, and now we're going to be talking to Jacob, who, if you'll remember from my Wormslow video, Jacob was in time period in that video, and so we got to talking, and that's when we came up with the idea of doing this video. So Jacob, if you will, tell us how long you've been doing this, grand total, even your volunteer time when you were young.
Cool. Yeah, well, I'll just briefly say I'm excited to be back. It's cool going from 1742 dressed as a British redcoat to the year 2021 dressed as a Georgia park ranger. So doing a little bit of time traveling here. But yeah, so my experience before coming to Wormslow State Historic Site, I started out at 15 volunteering at historic sites in the area. And I did some volunteer work at the Savannah History Museum and Old Fort Jackson, places like that for local attractions for a private historical society. And got hired there, worked there for a couple of years until COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, of course, tourism kind of died for a little bit. Everybody was staying at home and painting the house or whatever everybody was doing during COVID. And when things started opening back up, and of course, dealing with COVID for a little over a year, you kind of get used to living with it.
Right.
In some sense, you develop a new normal, and people started coming back out to parks and places. And so earlier this year in January, I came out here to Wormslow State Historic Site as a park ranger, and I absolutely love it. Good job.
Good. And now you've been out here since January or February?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was your experience like going, because you were working for Fort Jackson, which was the Coastal History Society, right?
Yeah, Coastal Heritage Society operates that.
So that's a private organization. What was your experience like going from a private organization to going to working for the state of Georgia?
So it's great to have a mixture of both of having, state-run parks, but also those parks that do private sites are important as well. I did what I used to do before I came here was a lot of what we called ourselves resource educators. So I did a lot of historical interpreting. I dressed out in period clothing, whether it was the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, or Civil War. We dressed out as soldiers, and we portray units that would actually be at those sites. And we'd interact with the guests and show them, what life was like at that specific site, maybe at the fort, what life was like at the camp. Sometimes we would show them what we do when we're off duty. Sometimes we go through battle demonstrations to show them the different types of fighting styles and stuff that was used in the time.
Right.
And so a lot of that experience carried over here, because of course here at Wormslow State Historic Site, this was the estate of Noble Jones. But as you know, and if those of you who watch the video should know, Noble Jones wore lots of hats. The guy had a lot of different hats in his closet.
He did.
He was a surveyor.
Mm-hmm.
He was a constable.
Mm-hmm.
He was a physician, and he was also a second in command of the Marine Boatman. That's just to name a few of the things he did.
I don't know that I would want him working on me as a doctor.
Right, yeah, doing a lot. But actually, our background here, it's a beautiful salt marsh in the year 2021. But in 1742, if you're looking at this used to be a river.
Right.
It spanned all the way to the other side.
That's a big river.
That is a big river. It was a little narrow, but it was deep enough right here, it's 50 foot deep, that ships could anchor here. So you're talking Spanish warships, troops could anchor, and land troops. And about 8 miles as the crow flies that way is the heart of the young colony of Georgia, which here in 1742 is only 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The heart of the young colony of Georgia, Savannah. Having troops, enemy troops that close is a little scary. So Noble Jones is here with his home fort, which is right across our bridge, and they build a tabby fort. Tabby's made out of burnt and crushed oyster shells, sand, and water. It's thick enough when it hardens properly to stop a musket ball. But that surrounds his home, and it overlooks this harbor behind us. But Noble Jones had 14 Marines here under his command.
With a patrol boat.
Yeah, they had scout boats, swivel guns, smaller called musketoons, and heavier swords called cutlasses. They patrolled the waterways here, just looking out for hostile enemy ships. But we really don't want them to get that close in 1742. At least the English didn't. So they had forts and fortifications and scout boats and ships all the way down to islands like Jekyll Island and St. Simon's Island.
Right.
Even Amelia Island. In fact, in 1739, a scout boat, some Marines heard commotion on Amelia Island where Highlanders were out chopping wood. And when they got closer, they discovered the Highlanders had been decapitated by a Spanish raiding party.
Right.
So, yeah, you look that up on a map, you'll see that we had a lot of forts, the English had a lot of forts and Marines closer to St. Augustine. So this is just kind of, I guess, a last-ditch effort. If they get this close, at least you have some fortification here looking out, or if they somehow sneak by everything. But still, it's important to guard this because we do not want the Spanish finding out about it.
Right.
But the reason it's not a river anymore is because they were building a diamond causeway not long ago, and of course that filled in the sediment, and now it's a marsh. It's one of the few times where mankind changed something of nature and actually made a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because salt marshes are extremely important to the coastal ecosystem. That Spartina grass that you see out there, that's when you think of a salt marsh, you think of that Spartina grass. And that actually absorbs a lot of the storm energy, and that protects our coast.
Right.
Additionally, when it breaks down, small organisms such as shrimp and crabs can feed on that. And because the salt marsh is affected by the tide, larger fish and stuff like that can't live here permanently. So what do? Well, they can pass through here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then it goes back to low tide, and that's when those smaller organisms feed on that broken down Spartina grass and other nutrients. And in turn, those smaller organisms feed those larger organisms in the rivers and the ocean.
That are transient through here at high tide.
Right. That can maybe come by through high tide.
As you know, we're here to find out what the daily routines are with the rangers, both the interpretive rangers and the regular park rangers, because every interpretive ranger is a ranger, but not every ranger is an interpretive ranger, correct?
Well, to some extent, every park ranger does want to do some sort of interpreting. You do some programs. Everybody has their different experience, and they bring something unique to the table. So each of us do some sort of interpreting, but others might be more involved. So some of us do military interpretation, where we dress out as soldiers.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah, some of us dress out as soldiers. Others might just do civilian. Some just might play historic games, or some might stay in a park ranger uniform and just tell the history of the site.
Right. Okay. And so we're going to be making the rounds, and you're going to get to see not only what we've been doing here today, what with Jacob and Aaron, but you're going to get to see the behind the scenes on some of these other areas too, and talk to some of the volunteers that you might not normally talk to. But if you ever come to these locations and you see a volunteer working,
Stop them and talk to them. They don't mind it.
Morning now. Woodpecker in the distance.
Just go ahead and call me the Dirty Jobs of the History Channel, okay? Mike Rowe, eat your heart out. I'm the trash guy.
So even having even for visitors, if you're visiting, and not so much here at Wormslow, because I mean I've been along the trails, phone connections typically good here,
Right.
but it's always a good idea to make sure that you have a compass, a safety whistle, and some other means of finding your way out if you get lost along the trails, because your phone, GPS, and calling might not work.
Right.
So.
Jacob and I checked the whole estate for trash and trails for visitors that we could assist before going back to the main office for the end of the day.
But every day we are working to ensure that Wormslow is around for generations to come, and that all our guests the next day come to a clean Wormslow and they have the best experience possible. So I love my job. You talk to all the park rangers here. We absolutely love what we do. We really thank you for watching this video and joining us as we talk a little bit about what we do on a day-to-day basis.
As you can see, we are now at Fort Jackson and we're back with Ranger Aaron at the beginning of his day. And as you can see, it begins early with prepping the fort to open for visitors. Aaron is a lot like myself. We both seem to develop patterns and sequences for getting things done so we can complete them quickly and efficiently. He begins right to left throughout the fort, starting with the display cases and then on to the bathrooms and so on. It doesn't take Aaron long to have the whole fort opened up and ready. I kind of feel like I was slowing him down some. After tending to the bathrooms, he moves quickly down the front side of the fort, hanging flags, uncovering cannons, opening munitions storage display areas, and jail cells. He even provides water for our furry four-legged friends. It's so peaceful here in the mornings, you almost forget you're only 3 miles from the port of Savannah. The quartermaster here pretty much works double time. All flags and shoes and the like are all made by her right here on site. And of course, Justin, the site administrator, has his hands in everything, from weeding to folding tarps to doing the administrative end of his job. This guy knows everything there is to know about this fort. And at every fort, you could almost guarantee there was always going to be a 24-hour fire. And then, of course, once everything is done and complete, it's time to go to work, doing the job that you and I see on a daily basis.
I understand you told you very well coached. Glad you said with us. Well, it sounds like when we say heavy artillery, we're not jesting because our ship killer guns weigh 8,000 to 9,000 pounds. But if you look at the cannon up there, notice how the guns in the top left are more flat toward the back of the tube. We actually have the exact same type of training muskets that we get to do They're made out of wood, so they're called Quaker rifles. They're passiveness, they don't keep bombs under. Now, if you could please raise your right hand for me. We're not going to swear you in, don't worry, but all of you are now right-handed. Because everyone in the Army is right-handed at 1864, whether you're born the way or not. Now make a pistol with your right hand, point it down at your side, place your rifle in your hand just like this. We call this position shoulder arm. So your trigger finger is under your circle, your trigger guard. Your thumb goes on top, your left hand at your side. Perfect. Now we're going to go through the steps together to load. Now, if you look behind you, that's a big of your imagination. However, if hypothetically speaking, if it was an actual ship, you see how it closes to our port. That's the reason why we're here. There's only one way in, one way out. And it's an ocean, that close. We have lines of soldiers marching at us on the horizon right now. The closer they are, the larger they appear. But the farther away they are, the smaller they appear. So we can adjust it so if they're that far.
If you'll notice, Aaron quickly runs through and explains not only each item in the display cases, but also life during the time of the fort. He has an outstanding way of relating these items and circumstances to life as we know it today. This ability, I have found, to be indicative of all the interpretive rangers that I have ever met. And don't think for a second that Aaron won't put you to work. He will find a job for each and every visitor to the fort.
Fit for action! Take equipment! Surge beats! Load! K-shot! 350 yards! Load! Plan, front! March! Halt! Ready! Discover your ears for sensitive to loud noises. Fire!
I'll be still, but sorry.
Cease fire! Fire in the rear! March! Halt! Secure the base! Cannoneer, belt, base! Pulse number chest, march!
Well, Aaron, it's been about, what, 2 months?
Time flies.
It it's been good to see you here today in a totally different role than you were over at Wormslow. It's always a pleasure to see you, but it's always a surprise to see what you're going to be doing today. You know, here we're at Old Fort Jackson, just outside of Savannah, and we do things a little differently here than we do at Wormslow, do we not?
Yes, we do.
At Wormslow, we only do the rifle shots. Here we do cannons, rifles, wood sticks, you name it, we do it, right? And as we saw, we followed Aaron through the morning practices of what he does when he gets here before he dons the uniform of the day, going through your opening process of coming through, unlocking everything, getting the different instruments that you're going to be using out, putting your displays up, and even occasionally running off people who hadn't paid yet and sending them back to the front door and saying, please, on your way out. Now, he did it a lot better than I would have. So Aaron, just in your own words, kind of carry us through your day here, because as you know, from the last time when, as you're describing it, we're going to be throwing up some video to go along with what you're saying.
Yes, splendid. So usually begin at 8 o'clock and clock in and then head on down to the fort. And we have a wonderful, beautiful view out here as you experienced. Even though we're only 3 miles east of Savannah, there's something of an oasis out here. We do have some noisy neighbors with some local industry, and that's a very timely reminder of how close our fort came to suffering that fate. We're very grateful that the fort is still going strong. So we have a small fort, but as you noted, we have a lot of different displays, and we try to really maximize every square inch inside the fort when it comes to being able to share our history with guests. So we have a fair balance too between some items that are original items that are inside the casemates in our museum portion, but we also have some other working collections items that are not period or not original artifacts. We also, as you saw, have wooden swords, wooden rifles, we have games. So it's very nice to encourage this to be as interactive as possible. So just went through, we are the maintenance staff out here, so scrubbing toilets and making sure the grounds are policed and cleaned, as well as maintained. So we got a small fort with a lot of different pieces, and we really try to maximize what we do have.
Well, now that's one thing that the Interpretive Rangers almost everywhere does, is they're also the maintenance people.
Yes.
They're the janitors.
Yes.
And of course, they're the people who give the tours. And when I was at Wormslow and I went around with Jacob, we were collecting trash up in the golf cart. Mm-hmm. We went through multiple golf carts trying to find one Jacob could drive. We also went by where the new garden was being put in. We went through the storefront, is what I call it, which is the location where you come in, you get your maps, you go through the museum, you have the store, and you guys have kind of the same thing up by your front gate.
Yes.
It's called the depot.
Yes.
And it's really nice inside there too. So once you get here, and you get, one person gets that open, correct?
That's right.
And then you or whoever's working that day comes down and they get everything opened up here. Now, as you were opening up some of these different doors and all, what were these different doors that you were opening up?
So we have what are called the ready rooms. And the ready room, there's two of them historically. We have one of them with items on display. We have our other ready room. That's where we actually make up our cartridges to use for rifle muskets and also our artillery rounds. So we keep our ammunition in there. We have the maintenance casemate where we have our light switches and things of that sort, our supplies. And then underneath the big stairs, we have what was the original powder magazine from the War of 1812. Today we have it being displayed as where during the Civil War we would primarily keep the ammunition for our small arms, for rifle muskets and the like. And then the other casemates, that was all your general storage space. You can just imagine if you got 150 soldiers here on paper, how much foodstuffs we go through. Also medical supplies and things of that sort. We also need rooms to be able to hold all the implements and equipments for the cannon. Historically, we had 8 ship killer heavy guns here for the War of 1812 and then also during the American Civil War. So you can imagine all the equipment that comes with that. We also added a 9th 32-pounder gun during the American Civil War as well. Then on the far left of our fort, we have what we have set up is the jail cell for unruly prisoners. Not so much for enemy prisoners, but for soldiers who didn't follow the rules. But the most popular prisoner we ever had at this fort was a baker. This baker was known to bake the very best, most delicious bread for the soldiers. So one day he was caught with a half a demijohn of whiskey, and only the officers are allowed to have alcohol. So he was clapped in irons, he was forced to wear a ball, a 32-pound cannonball chained up to his leg. He was sentenced for a month, but after about 10 days, they missed him so much that they let him go. That was the most popular prisoner we ever had in our jail cell at this fort. We also have the guard room, so we have some bunk beds. And typically at this fort, the soldiers will be on guard duty for 24 hours at a time. 2 hours on, posted standing on top of the fort or on the drawbridge, and 4 hours off. But during that period, even when soldiers are off duty and they're in the guard room, they're supposed to be in full uniform, just like I am, with the rifle musket on the rack, ready to jump up at a moment's notice. So they could take cat naps in there, that's about it. During the high season for malaria, or if it's very awful, extensive heat, they could shorten it to 12 hours, 12-hour shifts. And then we also have the sergeant of the guard room. And then finally, the other door that I was opening up is to our powder magazine. We had a powder magazine that was added on during the 1850s that could hold 10,000 pounds of gunpowder. Now, historically, there were indentations in the walls to allow ventilation shafts. And you can still see in our powder magazine the opening where there's a door. Historically, you'd fill up your bags full of gunpowder and pass your wool bags of powder through that little door to a rope and pulley dumbwaiter system on the back. And that's so you can quickly and safely get your bags of gunpowder up top to the cannon. So from right to left, those are all the little rooms that I was opening up.
Right. Now, up top, that door is no longer there, is it?
On the back of the powder magazine,
Right.
That's correct. It's no longer there.
I heard you talking about it earlier,
Yeah.
and then I was like, I don't see a door in that wall. And
Right.
when you moved away, I went over there
I
and was
noticed
looking
that.
around. I was like, where's this door? There's no door. And but I like how here you were going around and you were showing each individual job that was having to be done here. Now that's indicative of the way it was with life in the fort. Everybody had to know everybody else's job, correct?
Most certainly on a gun crew. Everybody had to know and be proficient at everybody's job on the gun crew.
Right.
But even when it comes to the operations of the fort, then yes, it's a very small fort. It can be very cozy. And so the soldiers would get to know everybody's role and what they're expected to do very quickly.
Okay. And that way, if something happened, they could easily fill in.
It also, something that we were discussing earlier is just the personalities of the people who are here. And one thing that I find striking is that Colonel Edward C. Anderson was asked by Robert Lee himself to command the Savannah River defenses. Anderson didn't want to be stuck here in Savannah. He wanted to go to the battlefield. But he says, all right, if General Lee asks me to, if that's where I'm needed, then that's what I'll do. But he was a formal naval officer and mayor of Savannah. But he was known to be as likely to show up at 2 o'clock in the morning as 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And whenever Colonel Anderson was around, the soldiers were on their toes. You notice I polished all my brass and my buttons because
Yes,
if
you
we're the
did
headquarters.
before we came out
yes,
this morning.
if we're the headquarters for the whole Savannah River defenses, this is a very prominent post. But when Colonel Anderson was not here, there's a noted shift in the lack of discipline. And so it's amazing to me, I think, just the effect that an officer can have on his soldiers as he is vigilant and keeps the men on their toes. But it is fascinating, kind of the shift, the same ground, pretty much the same position. We can see Union forces just down the river, but if we're well drilled and polished and disciplined, or if our discipline gets rather lax.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I noticed this morning when I first got here, and you and I were in the office, you wouldn't look at Justin and say, historian. You know, you would kind of look at him and say, he works downtown at one of the coffee shops or something like that. You guys have a big mix of people that work here, different backgrounds and etc. But there's one thing that you guys all are lock and step on, and that's the preservation of the history of the fort, and not only the fort, but the local area as well. That was the predominant part of the conversation this morning. And the way I look at it is there's three kinds of people. There's the people that see history in one side, there's people that see history in the other side, and there's the people who see history from the middle, trying to see both sides, and those are usually the most correct people. People have a tendency of slanting history to their liking, and if we keep it in mind, like we were talking this morning, that it doesn't matter if it's the South, doesn't matter if it's the North, it's all American. Doesn't matter, black, white, Asian, Indian, whatever, they're all American. So trying to keep those histories in line with what actually happened, and not trying to put a personal slant on it can become difficult at times. I think you as a history major know that, because as you read different books, you see different slants, so to speak. Some of our individuals that were here today didn't even know that Georgia was originally started as a slave-free state. They didn't know that Robert E. Lee was against slavery. They didn't know his thoughts on slavery. And if you knew Robert E. Lee's thoughts on slavery, you would go, oh my God, you know? I want to express the thank you for letting me come out today and go through the private sector forts and museums and etc. versus the public, which would be the Wormslow. You will see that they may do things a little differently, but the end goal is always the same. Always the same.
As you know, I always say, visit your federal, state, local, and privately owned parks. They give you the best bang for your buck. You'll never find anybody that has any more knowledge than these folks right here, and those are your interpretive rangers. So always remember, every trip starts with a step, and that step
Starts with you.
Thank you.
Ew.
Pretty intimidating, sure.